one of the biggest tips is try to understand the format of the interview before you even turn up. So many people, will guess. They'll walk into an interview and they'll guess how the interview goes. They'll guess whether there's two people, three people, whether it's a panel interview, an assessment, whatever the case may be. So if you're able to understand that before you even walk into the interview, then you've got a massive advantage. So try and understand from, if it's a recruiter, that's a fantastic opportunity, because obviously it's in the recruiter's best interest to employ you, right? So if you're working with a recruiter, ask the recruiter questions about the type of interview. How many people are going to be in the interview? Do they understand any questions that were asked from previous interviews?
You're going to have lots of other jobs. And I always say to them, whatever's on the job description, just be 80%, 50% okay with it, because the other 50% you're not going to know till you get the role. So how can we...
They catfish us, basically. That's what I'll say it is. Catfish.
Exactly. So my question to you, Andrew, is how can we filter bad job descriptions that are vague, generic, and what are the red flags that we should look out for? Because like you said, it's a lot of work to apply for jobs, prepare for the interviews. It's time consuming, energy draining. So how can we get away from those bad actors within the job market?
I think it's interesting with AI, because I know that obviously candidates are using it, but also recruiters are using it to sieve out the candidates as well. So it's almost that I'm using AI to do my CV, but I'm using AI to sift out the CVs. So,
Only if you're ready. Let's go.
Hello and welcome to Divine Egma, a podcast that talks about how to navigate through the complexities of the workplace as a modern day professional, while simultaneously having a side hustle. We appreciate all of our audience members for taking some time out of their day to tune into another episode, and look forward to providing you all with some value through our show today. My name is Sarah and I will be the host for this podcast. This podcast will be available on all platforms where you can find podcasts, including Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, and we're also on YouTube. Now, before we dive in, I have a small favour to ask. Creating this podcast takes a lot of time and energy, and every bit of support helps me keep it going and growing. If you're enjoying the show, 5-star rate, comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify can make a significant difference in helping new listeners discover us. Your support is invaluable in our growth journey. And if you're also watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss an episode. Want to show your appreciation more? You can even buy me a coffee through Buy Me a Coffee page. It's a simple way to support the show directly and helps cover production costs. Together, we can build an incredible community for ambitious professionals like you. Thank you for your support. It means more than you know. Now, let's get started.
welcome to the Divine Enigma podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about something so many neurodivergent professionals struggle with: writing a strong CV, navigating interviews, and building confidence in a very, I would say, tough job market that we have right now. We'll be asking Andrew a bit about that, but I feel like when just talking to people, just generally, they're finding it quite challenging to find jobs, because I feel like there's a lot more required than just a CV now. And we'll be anchoring this conversation in a fresh research that Esther conducted last year, as well as getting practical career advice from yourself, Andrew, who specializes in CVs and interview coaching. So let's get into it. So, first of all, Andrew, do you mind introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about what you do, what your company is, and how you can help people potentially right in this current climate that we're having, where people are really struggling to find roles, or I guess stand out a lot more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you very much for having me today, Sarah. So I'm Andrew Arkley, so I'm the founder and director of Purple CV. So we're a UK-based CV writing company. So CV writing is our bread and butter, but we've evolved over the years to do things like Sarah said there, interview coaching, but we also do career coaching, LinkedIn optimization as well. We've been around for just over 12 years, and we have an operation in the UK, which is our main operation, but we also operate in the Middle East, in Dubai, the USA, and also Australia as well. So we have a large team of writers and coaches up and down the country who are there to support individuals present their maximum value, present their best value, which is what a CV and doing an effective interview is all about. A little bit about myself. So my background is very much HR. Also, I have a passion for writing. So I put two and two together around 12 years ago, and I came up with Purple CV. In addition, I'm a business mentor for the King's Trust. I'm also a director for a large training company called eCareers, which provides professional qualifications to individuals as well. So I like to think that I have a passion, as can be seen by the businesses that I'm involved in supporting people with their careers. So this is a big part of my mission, is to help individuals. So I also do a lot of pro bono work. So we're a big sponsor for the Lord Sainsbury Foundation, which is a foundation that supports young engineers from various universities in the UK. So we sponsor their annual event. We also support a number of charities, homeless charities, so helping homeless individuals get off the streets. And a big part of that is obviously getting a job. So we support a number of charities as well. And we've done lots of stuff over the years, lots of talks and everything else. So no, delighted to be here today. And yeah, in answer to your question, Sarah, about what people can do to, I guess, stand out in the crowd. So yeah, the economy is not in dire straits right now. It's not like we're in a recession and unemployment rates are high. But what we are hearing is that, like Sarah said, it is really difficult. It's difficult to get a job nowadays. It's difficult to get an interview. So when it comes to presenting your best value over a CV or during an interview, there's a few things that are going to make you stand out. One of which is making sure we demonstrate our value and demonstrate our achievements that we've I guess amassed over our career. So one of the things that we do is help people structure their answers, structure their content on how to present that value, either in person or over the CV. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that on today's podcast. So hopefully that gives a little bit of a background about myself, Sarah. And once again, really happy to be here today.
Thanks, Andrew. And Esther, she's also a guest. She also has her own podcast as well, the Esther Bangura podcast. And Esther recently did some research around neurodiversity and neurodivergent people within the workplace. And would you mind kind of introducing yourself, Esther, and talking through, the research you put together and also about what you do and where you are at the moment?
Yeah, sure. Andrew, where have you been all my life? With all the support with CV and interviews. So I'm Esther Bangura. I am a neurodivergent woman diagnosed with dyslexia, dyspraxia. I was diagnosed initially at 35 and then diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 40. And I have always been in corporate world. I've been working since the age of 18. I've also had businesses on the side. And recently I launched the Neurodivergent and Money UK research survey, and it was really around me asking myself questions after receiving my ADHD diagnosis, asking myself, does money feel hard, with everybody that is a neurodivergent? Is it just me? And those questions led to me launching the survey. And over 368 people today have completed that survey and shared their thoughts, their challenges, their strengths, and the type of support that they're looking for around how they manage their finances as a neurodivergent. And I carried a lot of shame around money, a lot of guilt, not being able to manage it the way everyone else does. It was always a difficult pain point for me. And that's even whilst I was earning, a good salary. People think finances is only hard when you don't have money, but it's even hard when you do have, money to manage it. You have more responsibilities the more you earn. And so I am a neurodivergent and money coach. So my mission is really to help adults understand their brain in relation to money and to make managing money more calmer, more easier, and more in tune with how their brain works. So yeah, that's it from me.
Thank you, Esther. Lovely introductions from both of you. So I want to start with you, Andrew.
Mm.
And one of the questions that I want to kind of bring forward, because this is a neurodiversity podcast, a lot of neurodivergent people tend to have a pattern with frequent job changes, or I guess very short tenures in their roles.
Mm.
And when obviously maybe you've gone into a job for a bit and then you don't know whether to put that on your CV or not.
Yeah.
Amy, what is the best way to kind of present that in a very positive way on the CV, without
Yeah.
looking like you're someone who's, unstable?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think one thing that many people need to understand with CVs is that there's no right and there's no wrong answer with many, many things. And one of those things is what jobs are to include, or how long the gap should be. It all depends on the individual's experience, their history, their credentials, their approach to applying to that role. So, but there are some best practice, approaches or tips we have for individuals who have moved in their career often, because as you may be aware, there is a myth out there, rightly or wrongly, that employers are put off by people who job hop. Now the good news is that since COVID, it's become more acceptable to see people in a role for a year, 2 years, and then move on. Before COVID, it was probably a little bit old school. Employers want to see you in a job for 5, 10 years. That's going to demonstrate loyalty. But if anything, it's flipped around now. Employers want to see that you've moved on to some degree, because it shows that you're versatile. It shows that you're going to have a broad skill set. So I just want to kind of give some context on that. But let's say, for example, that an individual has job hopped, or gone from job to job often. So let's say they've got 3 or 4 jobs in the last year, or even 2 years. So one approach that we have is looking at the type of CV that we should put together. So there are actually different types of CV, notably a functional CV or a chronological one. So a functional one would be for someone who's changing careers or wants to focus on their skills rather than their experience. So on the CV, we would dominate the first page with talking about their skills, their transferable skills, and also their skills that they have in particular for that role. And what that does for the reader, a little bit like Google, page one is the most important, right? So by us dominating page one of the CV on your skills, it means that you're going to sell yourself before the individual understands that you've had 3 or 4 jobs over a year or two. The other way, there are some other small tips as well. So let's say, for instance, you had a job that ended in January 2024, and you didn't get your next job, or you didn't get your next job till 2025. Rather than put in the month, we can just put the year. So it shows, I guess I'm talking about career gaps now rather than
Yeah.
moving from job to job. But that's another tip for career gaps. But in terms of moving from job to jobs, it's about looking at the type of CV. So making sure we understand we're picking the right CV, to make sure that if we feel there's too many jobs, that we're going to mainly focus on our key skills. The other one is choosing whether to even include certain jobs, because obviously if you're going for one particular job and a job that you had last year or the year before is just not relevant to that job that you're going for now, then even consider whether you should include the job.
I like
It
the
might,
fact you mentioned that, I really like the fact you mentioned that because it makes me think about years ago when I had sort of CV coaching, someone telling me put in every single job you have. Like I worked at McDonald's, I worked at
yeah.
Next, and it's like that's not relevant for where I am right now. So that's a very good point that you've made, Andrew.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of goes back to what I said there with regards to there's no right or wrong answer, right? Because
Yeah.
if you leave out a job, then that might cause a gap in your CV. And that gap may work against you. So we always need to balance, what is relevant and, if it's not relevant, do we keep it out, keep it in, whatever the case may be. So it is a bit of a minefield, but it's about putting yourself in the eyes of the recruiter, the eyes of the company that is looking for a role, and making sure that your CV is extremely relevant. Putting anything that's irrelevant in your CV is a big no-no. What's the point in having irrelevant information in your CV? We should be replacing that with relevant information to that job, be it through achievements or particular skills that you have for it.
And that's the same go for LinkedIn as well, because I know that also a lot of employers are cross looking at your LinkedIn as well as looking at your CV as well. How does that play?
Yeah, so yeah, typically the golden rule is to make sure that your LinkedIn and your CV do match. If they don't match, it should still be very obvious that the CV relates to that profile. So your LinkedIn should be probably a little bit more closed in terms of your intentions, because obviously on LinkedIn, it's a public profile. So we don't want to be making, our current employer aware that we're looking for jobs. So we want to make sure that our LinkedIn is kind of flat when it comes to, looking for your next role. But yeah, in answer to your question, they should match. Your CV and LinkedIn should match, generally speaking.
No, that's really good. And I know you mentioned about long gaps as well and in
Mm.
employment, but sometimes people take long gaps because maybe they've burnt out from work. And
Yeah.
burnout is quite particular for me currently because I'm building my business Cognify Me, which is an app which supports people with burnout.
Mm.
And sometimes people tend to leave their jobs because of burnout, because the workload was a lot. Or
Yeah.
they've had to leave because maybe they've gone off to have a baby, or they have to look
Yeah.
after an old elderly relative, or maybe there's just some misalignment with the roles, and they've had to take time out. I mean, how can you explain to an employer that now I've had this part in my life, as a gap, I'm ready to come back into the world of employment?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, we going back to what I said there a second ago about relevance. In an ideal scenario, if we had the opportunity not to explain a gap, then that would be the first option. So if you have a career gap or career break on your CV, um, then if you're able to not include that career gap, then go for it. And that goes back to the tips that I just said a second ago. So again, if you ended your role, let's say in January 2024, and you started your new job in September 24, that's a 9 month gap, right? But on the CV, we don't need to put the month. We can literally put, we ended our role in 2024 and we started our role in 2024. It's
Mhm.
very, very ambiguous. So to the employer and to the reader, to them, they'll subconsciously even think that you didn't have a gap. But let's say you did have a significant gap. Let's say 2024 was your last role, or let's say 2023 was your last role, sorry.
Yeah.
And let's say 2024 or 2025 was your new role. So let's say you said you took a year out. First tip, you don't have to overshare. You're not there to justify anything to do with your mental health or whatever reason you took that gap. But first option is trying to explain that gap in a productive way. So if
Mhm.
over the course of that period you did anything productive through your, professional development, or maybe you did some courses, even if it's on something like Coursera or YouTube, if it's something which was structured and productive towards your development, then just go for that and explain that your gap was filled with professional development and it possibly was a career break, a planned career break. Because again, this is this is probably another tip for you is if you're going to explain a career break or put a career break on your CV, explain that it was planned. It may be a white lie, but at the end of the day, it's not a massive one. But explain that it was a break in order to recover or a professional reset. But if you're able to back that up with any sort of professional development, then that is going to be a big plus for you as well. But going back to my original point, if you don't have to include the break or the gap on your CV, then go for that. And that also, I guess, feeds into what we talked about as well, is picking the right CV. Because if we're able to sell our skills, sell our achievements, sell our transferable skills, then a career gap in your CV won't matter. The reader's going to be so impressed by your transferable skills and your demonstration of them. A 6 month, 3 month gap is going to go a lot, further down their list of priorities. And that's why how we lay out the CV is so important.
So if you put a gap, for example, you had a baby or you were having child caregiving for an elderly parent or someone
Yeah,
that's sick, is that is that something that you'll be seen as penalizing you? Because okay,
yeah,
I had a loved one that was really ill and I had to take 2 years out of my career because there was
yeah,
stuff.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, at the end of the day,
yeah.
the way that I like to think about it is if we're applying to a job where we feel that job is going to penalize you for personal circumstances, then we probably have to ask ourselves, is that a job I even want to apply for? So,
Exactly.
obviously honesty is the best course of action. So if you're going for a role and you feel it needs explanation, then go for it. And at the end of the day, as hard as it's a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? But if you are penalized for taking 6 months out to care for someone who is seriously ill that was close to you, and you're penalized for that, then if anything, see that as a blessing that that job has not come back to you. Because, if at some point in the future, God forbid, you need to take a break again or have a sick day, whatever, if you're penalized for something which is pretty serious, then yeah, it's probably not the type of company we want to go for anyway. So, in answer to your question, are you penalized? Really depends on the employer, right? Some employers are going to brush it off and say, well, look, this is life. And some, unfortunately, will turn around and say, I don't want to employ a person who's just had a career break for 1, 2, 3 years. So when applying for a role, do look at the mission statement, do look at the values of that company, and understand that the values of that company are real and understand that they are authentic. Because if they are, putting a career gap to care for a loved one should not be an issue at all.
No, that's really good to say that because sometimes when you're an NDR, particularly, and you're worried about taking time off work or how that might be perceived, it's
Yeah,
always important to know that you're going to the employer that it's it's the right employer where it's in
absolutely.
alignment with the way you work and values the skills that you offer and not penalize you for your personal circumstances.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
no, I really like that. There's another thing that I wanted to kind of touch on actually, and it was around AI. So
Mm.
obviously we're in the age of AI, chat GTP, what's the other one?
Forward
Uh,
and all that, yeah.
there's so many other like AI applications that you can use. But the biggest one we know is chat GTP and people putting their CVs up there and say, this is my CV. Um, I don't know how to write a CV. If it put it through chat
Hmm.
GTP, one of the things that a lot of people are saying is that everyone's CV looks generic. It looks the same. There's
Yeah,
nothing that's
absolutely.
really standing out. So if I have nothing against AI, and I think AI can help us in many, many ways, but at the same time, how can we make our particular CV stand out more rather than relying on functionalities
Yeah.
like
Well, kind of the
ChatGPT or
good,
yeah.
yeah, the good thing about AI and so many people using it is it's now making it easier for people to stand out. Because you see it a lot on LinkedIn. Recruiters are saying many applications just literally are verbatim, word for word the same, because people are using AI. So the good news is for those that put the effort and energy into putting a truly personal CV together. It's going to make you stand out more in this day and age. But for those that are using AI is obviously a good, a good starter in terms of putting content together. But context and narrative of your CV cannot be produced by AI. And narrative and context are only really understood with soliciting the right information about your career. And that's where we come in. We work with our customers to make sure we understand their career, understand their experience, and put the right narrative and correct narrative and personal narrative together on your CV. So yeah, just going back to the point there of using AI, just be very cautious in terms of if you're literally going to copy and paste what AI produces, then you're going to come across as pretty generic. And if
Mhm.
anything, even if it is a sniff of being generic, it's a massive turnoff for the recruiter because the recruiter wants to see passion and they want to see a genuine interest in the role. And especially when hundreds of people are applying for the same job nowadays, if there's any whiff of it being generic, you're going to be put in the no pile very quickly.
I think it's interesting with AI because I know that obviously candidates are using it, but also recruiters are using it to sieve out the candidates as well. So it's almost that I'm
Yeah,
using AI to do my CV, but I'm using AI to sift out the CVs. So
yeah.
it's
Yeah, there's many people that are saying, well, but you're telling us not to use AI, but the recruiters are using AI to sift out the CVs. I guess,
yeah,
but there are two very different parts of the process. So,
yeah.
there are ATS systems now, so systems that are using AI to intuitively understand a CV. And yeah, I don't know if we'll talk about that later, but ATS systems are a big part and a big consideration when putting a CV together nowadays.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later, the ATS system, because I
Mm.
do have questions around that. But hooray, you've got a job, you got a job interview, you got called. So how would one prepare for that very well, particularly if you've got a neurodivergent condition and maybe sometimes coming across that interview doesn't actually come across well because maybe you haven't got the best memory or you can't actually remember everything that you've done in this, in your role, but you've done the role well. And even if you're not neurodivergent, sometimes interviews can make you very nervous. You can feel like, oh, what have I messed up or say the wrong thing or slip up? How, what kind of techniques or methods can
Mm.
people use once they've been called for that long awaited interview for that role that they've been applying for?
Yeah, well, one of the biggest tips is try to understand the format of the interview before you even turn up. So many people, will guess. They'll walk into an interview and they'll guess how the interview goes. They'll guess whether there's two people, three people, whether it's a panel interview, an assessment, whatever the case may be. So if you're able to understand that before you even walk into the interview, then you've got a massive advantage. So try and understand from if it's a recruiter, that's a fantastic opportunity because obviously it's in the recruiter's best interest to employ you, right? So if you're working with a recruiter, ask the recruiter questions about the type of interview. How many people are going to be in the interview? Do they understand any questions that were asked from previous interviews? What is it they liked or disliked about other candidates? Try and get as much information about the format and about the type of questions that are going to be asked before you even walk into the interview. And that's going to give you a huge advantage because then you can go away and prepare. But failing that, or even if you do get that, the biggest tips are is in preparation is role playing. So probably 40 to 50, maybe 60% of questions that are asked in an interview are asked in every interview. There might be a slight variation, but I can bet your bottom dollar that most interviews are going to ask, tell me about yourself, tell me about your career, where do you want to be in 5 years, what's your strengths and weaknesses. These are all questions that we probably all heard before in interviews, and they're very common and they make up a big portion of your interview. So go away, look at those common questions and prepare for them and role play. Um, so role play with your family, role play with your friends, role play in front of a mirror if there's no one around, and role play your answers to those common questions. Because If you can get those common answers, common questions and the answers down, get them down packed, then pretty much half of your interview you've nailed it because they're common interview questions, right? So if you nail that 50%, if the other 50% doesn't go well, then at least you've got 50% that did go well to influence the other 50%. So role playing is a big tip, and neurodivergent or not, this is a massive tip for everyone. So the other tip is methodical answers. So looking at ways in which we can answer questions methodically. So there's many ways that we can do that. We've got the STAR method and also the CAR method. So STAR is situation, task, action, result. So when you're asked a question, many questions nowadays are competency based, and they'll ask you for particular examples in your career. So let's say for customer service, one of the questions might be, tell me about a time that you handled a difficult customer. So they're asking about a particular example in your career, and many people will waffle. And they'll waffle because they're not going through the different steps in their head as to how to answer that question. So STAR will look at the situation. So we explain the context, the task, the action, the result. And by following those different steps in your answer, you're going to be methodical. You're going to show that you're concise. You're going to show that you're professional because you're approaching a problem in a very stepped way. Answering questions in a methodical way through techniques such as the STAR method or CAR method is probably my next biggest tip.
No, I know that that's one of the challenging parts of the interview, trying to remember all your examples, because you might have that role for like a year and thinking about one of the things that I think I really struggled with when it came to interviews, that what if the example that I've memorized doesn't come up? Do I remember all of my examples? Like, particularly when it's roles where you need to show some kind of technical understanding of the role, and the employer wants to know, or the potential employer wants to know if you have that skill set and you've dealt with those kind of things where, for example, like tell me about time you've used a certain piece of technology, and how you've used that to, manage a team or manage issues within the workplace, and trying to remember all of this. I've had so many different things like that, but how will I pick the right one and one that will stand out as well? So it's really helpful to know that, and the tips that you're giving us on this podcast, such gold tips. They're really good. So thank you. I'm going to move over and slightly switch gears a little bit and go to Esther. So I know, Esther, you did some research around money and neurodivergent people, and there was one of the questions that you had within the survey which was around careers, and whether certain neurodivergent individuals felt that their careers maybe were stalled due to not earning the level of income they would want to earn, due to not getting the kind of roles they would truly deserve, but because of their neurodivergent conditions, it was kind of blocking them from getting there.
Yeah, that's correct. I just want to share a little bit about like the profiling of the respondents. So the majority were working adults, roughly late 20s to 40s. They were employed or self-employed. Many are in a professional or skilled role: education, healthcare, finance, tech, creative industries, public sector, and so on. A large proportion were late identified ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, or a combination of them. But what was really important is that many of them didn't have a formal diagnosis, but they knew something was wrong, because a lot of people are exploring around, being a neurodivergent, and so they're self-identifying. But what really matters is that, the data reflects people who are functioning on paper, but internally, there's struggles there, whether it's, getting a job, changing jobs, etc. But yeah, so around one of the questions was around whether or not they could be earning more if they had more support as a neurodivergent. And so around 70% of respondents said they felt that they could be earning more with better workplace support, and And there were like barriers. So there were barriers around unclear expectations in their role, inconsistent feedback from managers or leaders, lack of flexibility in their role. And also, what came up a lot was the fear of being misunderstood or penalized if they were to ask for adjustment. So people didn't feel like they needed special treatment, but what came out was that they just needed more predictability, more clarity in their role, and more psychological safety. So, you know, some of the surprising insights and the quotes that stood out, what I really liked about the survey was that it wasn't just like tick box, it was very much qualitative. So I gave respondents an opportunity to actually write out in their own words what they wanted to say. And one thing that really stayed with me, some of the quotes that really stood out, was people saying, every time I change a job, I feel relief at first, and then I feel shame later. You know, like once they get in the role, they've worked so hard to get in the role. And it goes back to what Andrew mentioned earlier, that as much as we are going to be interviewed, we also have to interview, you know, these recruiters and the people offering the job to make sure that it's a right fit. I think for neurodivergence, being in the right role is really important, not just getting a job, you know, to pay bills, but being in the right role is important because it impacts our mental health. You talked about, the business you're building, Cognify Me, is all about helping employees and neurodivergents to be able to manage burn out. So if you're in a role that burns you out, you're likely going to leave, and you're likely going to job hop and maybe have gaps whilst you recover. So it's a real thing. Another quote that really stood out was, I'm great at my job, but I'm bad at selling myself. And it goes back to what Andrew was saying, how important that, skills page is, that page one. And many neurodivergents struggle with articulating their skills, poor working memory. Sometimes when I'm applying for a job, I'm like, I don't even remember the things I'm good at. One of the things that I do personally is like I keep a log. I don't do this daily, but I have like a Word doc, and I just put the day every day, and I kind of just bullet point what I did that day, so that when I come to update my CV or I'm going for a job interview, I can go back and refer to it, and I can remember, oh, I did a presentation that day. Oh, I helped, fulfill that procurement process and things like that. So working memory can be a big challenge for neurodivergence, remembering. So that's why I think working with somebody to do your CV, they are going to ask you relevant questions, and that will kind of help trigger your memory. So yeah, it's a big thing in terms of the challenges people are experiencing, and especially neurodivergence, where they feel that they could be earning more if they had more support in the workplace. So there's one thing getting the job, but there's also, once you get the job, being able to stay. And I think Andrew mentioned about the gaps, and it's like a vicious cycle of like maybe the burnout, lack of support, having instability in their role. And for a lot of people, even with disclosure, and you might ask this a bit later, but some people feel stuck. They're between two kind of fears of, if I disclose at the point of interview about my neurodivergence, will I be hired? And then it's, okay, if I don't disclose, I'm not going to get the support, and that's going to lead to burnout, or that's going to lead to me not being able to perform in my role well and maybe be put on a performance.
I think disclosure is one of those, I guess, gray areas, and my rule of thumb is that you should always disclose, but it depends on the point of when you disclose. And that's when you decide the right time to disclose, this is my condition. So it might not necessarily be an interview, but it might be at the point of the job offer, where they'll probably have a HR team that will give you the opportunity to disclose any kind of conditions that might affect your role. So you just have to be, I don't think it's good not to disclose. I think you should let people know this is what I have, but just at the right time. It's almost like everything has a process. and you choose the right point at when to let people know this is where I am. And it's also it's the same that goes, I guess Andrew might agree or disagree with me. I guess it comes to the same thing where, when you do get the job offer, like um negotiating those salaries. So maybe the salary range might be between, let's say, between 35k to 45k. I'm just plucking up a number in the air, and you probably want the 45k salary, and negotiating that amount before you take the offer of the role. You wouldn't negotiate right at the interview, would you? You would negotiate once you've been offered the job. So it's almost the same way when you look at disclosure. It's there are different points that you then open those things up to the employer to see how well they'll take you as an employee. And also, you have to be mindful about the type of job you are applying for. So, for example, if I'm working for a role where it's known as a neurodiversity company, I'm going to disclose straight away, because I know they will want to know that I'm neurodivergent, and they're probably looking for people like me that are neurodivergent. So, you have to take those factors into account. I don't know how much you agree with that, Andrea, but that's how I would
Yeah,
probably
no, you're
say it.
absolutely right. Choosing when to disclose and choosing when to negotiate is critical. So it's always just throughout the process, always, yeah, just always make sure you reflect and be very self-aware of what stage of the process you're in and whether bringing up the salary at that point is the best thing. Now, ideally, um, to discuss or disclosing neurodivergency ideally should be after your offer. That's pretty much the golden rule. But there are exceptions to that. And with regards to salary, it's always about making sure you understand that if you're going to negotiate for the higher tier or the higher salary, is backing it up with value. At the end of the day, employers want value for money, right? So if they're going to spend £10,000 more on your salary, they want to see how that equates to improved business performance. So talking about your achievements, talking about how you justify that amount of money is really important.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. Because you can't just say I want this 40, but they might, why do
Yeah,
you want 45k?
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Esther, I wanted to ask you about the money and stability and the burnout. So what did you find with the links between money, stress, burnout, and career instability from the survey that you did? And how does that overlap in terms of, I guess, career progression or career instability, or maybe even feeling
Mm.
stagnated where you are in your career because of these other factors that push you to try and apply for roles. For example, you might just apply for a role because the money is good, because you've taken time off work, but you need the money, but maybe that role might not be right for you, and then you'll just do it for a bit, thinking that you tell yourself I can just manage. Then you burn out, and you go through that burnout and recovery cycle again.
Mm. Yeah, and you've literally just said it. It forms a loop. It literally is like this vicious cycle where burnout will lead to job change. And then that job change might disrupt your income, because it might mean that you have to take something less because you're desperate to get a job. Or yeah, for whatever reason. And then now you're earning less, or you're not earning as much as you feel that you should be earning. That income instability can lead to anxiety. And then that anxiety is going to impact your executive function, your ability to plan, organize, and live your day-to-day life. And that in turn increases burnout, and it just becomes a vicious, cycle. So it really is important, for all people, but especially neurodivergents, to really prepare themselves to, apply for the right jobs, understand the values of the organization. Is this a role, not just to get the job, but is this a role that you can stay in long term? How big is the organization? Are there opportunities to move around? So I worked for TfL for 15 years. And one of the things I loved about TfL, and how I believe they were very neurodivergent friendly, especially in the operational department, is that you can move stations, you can move around. There's like so many different roles. The organization's so big. So you have opportunity to kind of move around, develop your skills and, go in the right place. And when I was a manager there, I would have staff members that I just knew this staff had no business being on the station because they just don't like customers, they're grumpy, they just don't like customers. And just speaking to like that particular member of staff, and I would discover that actually what they would love is just to sit behind a train. They're very technical, they like complex things, and they just want to drive the train. And so I would make it my mission to support that member of staff in getting a train driving role, because that's where their skill set is. That's where, they're able to function more. So I think being in the right role is really important. Being able to sell yourself so that you can get the right role, being able to articulate your skill set in your CV and especially at the interview, so that you can be able to, request the support that you need, obviously after when you get the role, but to be able to earn the money that you deserve. A lot of neurodivergents have RSD, rejection sensitivity disorder. There can be lack of self-belief, lack of confidence in themselves, having to prove themselves. It's not like they can't do the role. I remember when Andrew was speaking earlier on, it took me back to when I first applied for the customer service role at TfL. I was like 23 years of age, went for interviews, but I think the star format had just started to come out. And I didn't understand it. I didn't look at, what format they're going to use. I was just going for a job interview. So when they were asking me about a specific time and place and what I did, the task and the actions and results, I really struggled with that. And I was just giving very generic examples to say, oh yeah, I help customers all the time. Oh yeah, I, deal with challenging customers all the time. But they wanted that specific example. And the lady that interviewed me, she was absolutely amazing. And she said to me at the end of the interview, she said, I'm really sorry, but you haven't passed the interview, but I know that you can do this job. She said, I want you to go away and I want you to study the star format. This role is going to come out again in 6 months and I want you to reapply. And so I went back to Superdrugs because that's where I was working before. I went back to my Superdrug job. And then I did study the star format, and I realized I had the examples there, but I just wasn't able to bring it out in the interview. But she could see, and being a neurodivergent person, I go around the house and she could she's waiting for me to get there, but I just wasn't getting to the point. So really preparing yourselves for the interview, is really important in being able to get the job that you truly know is going to support you with your income goals, as well as for you to be able to function in it long term as a neurodivergent. I hope I didn't go around the house answering that question, but you can edit what you don't want out.
No, you articulated that absolutely amazingly, Esther. No, thank you. I want to go back to you, Andrew, because I wanted to talk more about AST, which is the technology they use to scan CVs to make sure that they're picking the right ones. There were two things that kind of came up to me when you kind of mentioned that. Number one, in today's market, if we look at LinkedIn, sometimes you'll look at a role on LinkedIn. I'm just using LinkedIn as an example, and I'm sure other job boards do certain similar things as well. But you may see over 300 to 500 people have applied for this job. Yeah. And then you're almost like, oh, what's the point in me applying? And then almost at the same breath as well, you have a CV writing company, but people will be like, well, I could go to ChatGPT. I could go to Claude AI and they could do my CV. That could do my CV for me. So how does having someone help you with your CV then going to an AI to do it compared to, having someone hold your hand and like, this is how your CV should look like. And also how can you stand out with ATS being scanning CVs where maybe your CV, you do have the skill set, but maybe they're just picking the person that appears stronger, or even knowing if these jobs are actually real, because that's another thing as well. But I've asked kind of 3 questions in one. So we'll start with the first one about how do you stand out, in a competitive market where you might look at a job board, LinkedIn, for example, see a role you like, but like over 500 people apply for that role.
Yeah. Well, as hard as it sounds, that don't be put off because I go back to my point earlier, which is the majority of those applications are going to be applications with no genuine interest or just generic applications. There's even software or applications now which will apply on your behalf. So yeah, a lot of these applications are generic. They don't show a genuine interest. And therefore, if your application is genuine, does show the interest, has a CV which is tailored to that job, then you have a very, very high chance of being shortlisted. So yeah, try not to be put off because many of those applications are just not relevant to that job. And you'll even see it from many recruiters now where you'll see many stories of these hundreds of applications, and even the ones that they do get back to, people are not responding, and that just shows that they weren't even applying properly in the first place. As for ATS and standing out with an applicant tracking system, I go back to my point earlier also that there's no right or wrong answer with ATS systems. That there are some best practice guidelines, but there's so many systems on the market that are used by recruiters. Some of them work particular ways, and some of them don't work particular ways. But there are some fundamentals that we need to be aware of to stand out for applications that are using ATS systems. Number one is the content. So we need to make sure that our content is relevant. We need to make sure it has the right keywords in a natural way. And we need to make sure it's extremely tailored to the job spec. So when looking at the job spec, you want to put your CV side by side with the job spec and make sure what's being requested in that job is demonstrated in your CV. The other element is format. So there's many myths about this, what format to use, etc. But it's best to play it safe. So making sure we don't put any graphics in your CV, for instance, graphics for many ATS systems will not be read. Using text boxes, being inconsistent in your formatting. So for instance, in your current role, if you on the CV, if you put the date, the job role, then the company, on your next role, making sure it's consistent. So don't put the company, the date, the job, because some ATS system will look for that consistency in order to give the summary to the recruiter. But like I said, there's no two ATS systems are the same. An ATS system is simply there to collect, filter, and manage job applications. Some of them are more intuitive than others. For instance, I just was exposed to an ATS system last week. I had a meeting with an ATS system, and it was an amazing system. It embedded AI as well. So what it would do is it used AI to actually fully read the CV and give its own synopsis and recommendation to the recruiter based on the narrative of the CV. It was amazing. So typically an ATS system would just look at particular triggers such as a keyword, location, whatever, and then kind of do a filter based on that, where this one was much more advanced. So yeah, sweating about it too much is not a recommendation. Building and writing your CV for a human to read should be your approach. And if you do that, the chances are is that the ATS system will filter you out correctly anyway.
I just want to go back onto like looking at examples and matching the role. So could you give an example of that? So for example, I wanted to apply as a role as a software engineer, for
Yeah.
example, and I needed to have skills such as native Node. I'm just thinking of and AI with native Node and React, for example. These are some of the skills that you might need as a software engineer.
Yeah.
How would that be demonstrated on a CV, and how would you show?
Yeah.
So if the jobs description says we're looking for an engineer with 5 years of experience with Node and native React and AI understanding. How would you
Yeah,
demonstrate that in your CV to ensure that you're matching that role so you potentially will be called for interview, and knowing there are
yeah.
probably other engineers applying for that role? Because I know sometimes with engineering roles, you'll be asked in terms of a competency-based question in terms of your interview, but also there'll be technical questions to show that can you really code? Um, do you know how to build back-end systems
Mm,
independently and all of that stuff?
mm. Yeah, so as obvious as it might sound, um, is making sure to actually put the keyword. So let's say software engineering, which is not my specialty in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But let's say, for instance, you're applying for a software engineering role. If that role requires you to be, an expert in Python and JavaScript and AWS,
Mhm.
don't go and put that, you're well versed in common software engineering applications, because
Okay.
that, from an ATS point of view, adds no value whatsoever. If
Mhm.
that job spec says you must be an expert in Python, you must be an expert in JavaScript, then make sure you actually put that word in your CV, because that's a keyword that someone is going to filter, on an ATS system, for instance. They're going to filter out people who have knowledge and expertise in Python. And if you don't go and mention Python and mention something like you're an expert in common applications, then you're not going to get filtered. So yeah, that's probably the biggest tip, is making sure that the synergy is not only about great, I'm perfect for this role, but is looking at the job spec, understanding the theme and understanding the skills and the expertise that are required. So look for common words or common phrases that are used in that job spec. They may mention, for instance, that Python is a critical part 3 or 4 times in the job spec. So you can bet your bottom dollar that Python is going to be important. And therefore, in your CV, don't only mention that you're an expert in Python, but when it comes to your achievements, talk about how you use Python to do a particular project, because then you're going even a step further to say, not only am I an expert, but this is my proof.
I also wanted to ask about cover letters. Are they worth what they need to, do you need to include a letter nowadays?
Yeah,
Worth it? I don't
yeah, yeah. A
know.
lot of people ask this question. So
Yeah.
first and foremost, if a job application asks you for a cover letter, then include a cover letter. There's no exception. If you
Mm.
choose to miss it out because you think cover letters have no value, then you're not going to get shortlisted for that role, because you're just skipping an initial request of the application. So if it asks for a cover letter, include a cover letter. If it doesn't ask for a cover letter, then include a cover letter only on the basis that that cover letter is completely tailored to that job application. If you're going to apply with a generic cover letter on that job application, that is going to do you more harm than good. Because again, it goes back to what I said earlier. Recruiters want to see that you have a genuine interest in that role. And if you put a generic cover letter, that they're going to say that this person has just literally copied and pasted. I'm not interested. And they
Mhm.
won't even read your CV. They'll read the cover letter and they'll just bin the CV and bin the rest. So only include a cover letter if it's tailored to that role. My opinion is, and based on my experience, is if you do include a cover letter when it's not asked for and it's tailored to that role, then that's going to be a massive advantage for your application, in my opinion.
I do have something that just kind of popped into my mind around the job search, you know. I guess looking for jobs is a job in itself, and there is strategy around it.
Yeah,
And I'm someone who, I can admit to this, I don't do this anymore, but I used to be that job person, job hunter that would just send the same CV to like 100 recruiters and hope that, almost like spray and pray,
pray and
process.
pray.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just let me just hand out my CV and hopefully someone will get back to me. Um,
yeah.
but I don't think that is the best methodology. So what kind of tips can you give people who are the strategies that they should take when they're starting to look for roles, rather than just looking at a role. Oh, project manager role. I'm a project manager. Let me apply, and not really looking at the description
Yeah, absolutely.
or understanding what the role is about properly.
Yeah, I think probably the best thing you can do really is to sit down at the start of the job search process and agree with yourself what is your strategy. Because if you go into the job search process with no strategy, then you literally you can't manage what you don't measure with regards to how successful you're being, right? So you need to sit down at the beginning of the process and make sure you really nail down the criteria of the type of role and what role you're looking for. That's first and foremost is understand that. So make sure you understand, okay, I'm applying for roles in only Southwest London. My salary must be 35,000 or 40,000, whatever an example might be.
Mm.
It needs to, have 30 days holiday a year. It needs to have flexible working, hybrid working. Set out your criteria. And then with that criteria, go out into the open world and make applications, but only with that criteria. And then as part of that strategy as well, is trying to make sure you understand what does success look like to you in your job search process. Now, ideally, it would be to get your job in the first week that you start applying, but
Yeah.
it's not gonna work like that, is it? So,
Yeah.
think to yourself, okay, if I get three interviews in my first month and one offer, then that is what success looks like to me. And by you having that in your head, it means that you're able to, at the end of your first month, you're able to say to yourself, great, I've met my target of that, or I didn't meet my target. And if you didn't meet your target of three interviews and one callback, or whatever the case may be, then you need to ask yourself, okay, am I comfortable to continue that strategy, or do I need to broaden my criteria? Because it might be that your criteria is way too specific, or there's
Mhm.
just not enough jobs, there's just not enough demand. So it might be that you need to lower your salary expectations. It might be you need to think, okay, I need to do a bit more of a longer commute here. But the main thing is that you have an internal dialogue to say what is your strategy, because there's nothing worse than going into a job search process, you know doing hundreds of applications thinking, "Oh, I'm going to be successful because I've done 200 applications." At the end of the first month, you've just got nowhere because you sent out a load of generic applications and haven't had any engagement. So go in with a strategy. That's the best thing.
And I remember, Esther, you kind of mentioned, and I think this will really help the listeners in regards to you almost have to prepare yourself, even if you're not looking for a job, but almost
Mhm.
prepare yourself that you might have to look for a job, because by going through your current skills that you are demonstrating within the workplace and keeping log of all those things you did with your current employer, that will put
Mm,
you in great stead when it comes to actually looking for roles. Because sometimes what happens, and it happens to probably a lot of, it probably happens to anybody, but I think it happens to a lot of NDers where we don't really think about long term. We don't have a long term planning horizon. We tend to plan in the moment or panic,
Mm.
or we make rash decisions based on adrenaline or how we're feeling, because it's an emotional decision. But what we need to start doing, I think, and this is for people to, even if you're not neurodivergent, but you have to kind of have a planned horizon, because nothing is permanent. Even though they say you're in a permanent role, it may not be
Yeah.
permanent. So it's always important that whatever you're picking up from the role that you're in currently, know that you remember those skills, you know what you've done there. Looking at your CV every, I don't know, every 3 months,
mm,
6 months as an audit, so that when a time comes where you may have to look for another role, potentially, you kind of have that ready. And that's sometimes not always easy to do, because you're just in the midst of your role, you're doing your job, you're performing at work, you're trying to hit target, you're trying to meet all your objectives at work. But it is important to take light of everything that you've done over time, and
Yeah.
make a quick log of it, even if it's like a little spreadsheet you have or a little notepad you have in your filing system, saying that I did this, so that when it comes to your 3 month, update of your CV, you can add those things when you're ready. And if you then choose to look for another role, you're in the best position to do so because all that information is there.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even working with somebody like Andrew in his company, I wouldn't wait until I'm applying for a job to even start that process. I would reach out in advance and, hey, Andrew, I'm looking into this type of role in the near future. How do I need to position myself?
Hmm.
Because for neurodivergence, it's the preparation that's key. It's preparing ourselves. It's giving ourselves time to think about what we want, think about our skill set, how we can translate that. It's likely that the CV might have to go through several drafts. So I agree with what you're saying, not to wait until it's time, to move or when you're redundant or, that kind of thing, just sort of plan and do bits of it. I also did want to ask a question to Andrew because, I'm very suspicious of organizations and businesses, right? I've
Hmm.
applied for jobs that once I've got in the role, it's nothing like the job description. It's like, hold on a
Yeah.
minute. It's like, I didn't sign up for this, and I always say to my like younger nieces and nephews that are like graduating from uni, I always say to them, look, your first job is just going to be your first job. You're going to have lots of
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
jobs. And I
Yeah.
always say to them, whatever's on the job description, just be 80%, 50% okay with it because the other 50% you're not going to know till you get the role. So
So
how
the ones that
can we,
they catfish us basically.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I'll say
yeah,
it is. Catfish.
exactly. So my question to you, Andrew, is how can we filter bad job descriptions that are vague, generic, and what are the red flags that we should look out for? Because, like you said, it's a lot of work to apply for jobs, prepare for the interviews. It's time consuming, energy draining. So how can we get away from those bad actors within the job market?
Yeah, I think it's about utilizing your own experience in your career. So maybe, you know, if you've had previous roles which you haven't enjoyed or made you happy, are there any triggers within that job spec that, have the same sort of language, same sort of, I guess, intent with regards to the type of working environment? Um, I think it's also the research is critical, isn't it? It's about understanding the company. So really, deep dive into the company, their ethics, their mission, their values, and really try and understand, what they stand for as a company. Because, if the CEO of that company or MD of that company demonstrates themselves in a particular way, and that's a way that you don't get on with um, then yeah, the chances are is that the culture is going to be the same as that MD, and therefore you're not going to get on with it. So I think research is critical, and the way that we can research is by making sure we follow the company on things like LinkedIn, follow the MD, have a look at employees of that company, do some research around anything to do with attrition within that company. That's going to be a good indicator as well. Looking at any news or any articles if it's a big company, because obviously that's going to be again indicative of the culture as well. So I think research is pretty critical, and I think once you get in the role, if you feel you've been catfished, then again, it's about making sure you understand what your strategy is within your career. Is it a job which is just a stepping stone? Is it a job just to pay the bills? Or is it a job that is a critical part of your career? If it is a critical part of your career, then doing everything to make sure you're successful and making sure you have a path to being eventually happy in that role. And if you don't see that path, then make a decision because being in a job that you're not happy in is counterproductive to your mental health, let alone let alone your career, because you're not going to succeed. But make sure you try everything. So be honest with your manager, speak with your manager, obviously try and be very tactical about what you're trying to get across, in the sense of, this is not what I signed up for. Um, it might just be a misunderstanding. It might be a lack of training. It might be the fact that you've gone in and you're not doing something right, and therefore it's frustrating you, and therefore you're not as productive as you would like to be. And it might be something as simple as the training was missed. Have a chat with your manager. The manager might say, "Oh my God, we should have trained you on this, and we missed it. So let's get you trained up." But as much as it's an exhausting process for the interviewee and the employee, remember also it is a process. I don't want to say exhausting, but it is a process, and it's intensive for the employer as well. It costs thousands of pounds to employ someone, and the
Mhm.
employer, well, most good employers, will want you to be successful. And if they understand that quickly when you start the role, then they'll try and put that right. Otherwise, they would have put weeks and thousands of pounds to waste. So, we need to think about, believe that our employer has our best interests at heart. Unfortunately, some employers don't, but many employers do.
Yeah.
What do you think about platforms like Glassdoor and
I was just gonna ask
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's Glassdoor as well. I was trying to think of another one as well I came across. I totally forgot. But I would say, yeah, Glassdoor is a good one. LinkedIn is good, because with LinkedIn, you can quite easily, if you didn't know, you can quite easily put your LinkedIn on stalking mode and go and look at employees. So, put your LinkedIn on private mode, so they don't see it as it's you, and go and look at the manager, go and look at your team, go and look at the employees that are part of that company, and see what they're saying on LinkedIn. Are they all looking for jobs? Do they all have open to work profiles? Because, if they do, that might be a good indicator something's going
Yeah.
wrong. Go and look at your manager. Is your potential manager, are they a thought leader? Are they feeding into the thing that they should be passionate about, which is their job, their company, right? So yeah, go and look at that, because that will say a lot of words as well, along with things like Glassdoor. And there's another one as well, but I totally forgot. But yeah, those two platforms are good.
And do you know what you mentioned about these catfish companies? I don't find it's the companies necessarily that are bad. I find that sometimes, when you get recruitment consultants, I've had very bad recruitment consultants, and they'll
Yeah,
put me forward for jobs that just don't make any sense. I don't
yeah,
I find more success when I go directly to the employer. So I don't know, it's just
yeah,
the balance between both, but that's just my own personal experience. I can't speak of, what other people have had, but I find when I go directly to the actual recruiter, like the job, I get a better outcome, and I can probably do more research than having a recruitment say, "Oh, there's a role for you, do you want to
yeah,
take
yeah.
it?"
Yeah, the chances
Yeah.
are, if you do go with a recruiter, always check the employer, because,
Yeah.
it might be the agreement between the employer and the recruiter is that the recruiter is not exclusive to advertising that job.
Mm,
So if they're not exclusive, it probably means that the employer will also put the job ad out directly. And as we all know, recruiters make their money from you being successful, right? So
mm.
for some employers, that they'll save a lot of money by not going through the recruiter, but obviously comes the admin of dealing with applications. So it really comes down to the employer. But yeah, if you can apply directly, then yeah, absolutely go with it.
Yeah, I think well, I've had a mixed bunch, I would say, but yeah, I think that if you go to the employer directly, I think you get a better outcome rather than just going to
Yeah, a lot of people say that. Yeah,
recruitment consultants that send
yeah.
you jobs that might not make sense, or they'll tell you one thing and then when you get there, you're like, this is something completely different, which I've had an experience of. That tends to happen because I used to do a lot of contracting, and there were roles I went into thinking it was this, and then when I got there, it was like,
Ah.
oh, it was something else completely. And I was like, okay, let me deal with that right now. So yeah, you're definitely right on that. I would like to kind of like just kind of wrap this up on from both points, for both of you actually. So if you could give one piece of career advice I'll start with you, Esther, actually. To neurodivergent professionals today, what would it be? Given that you did your research on this, and you also being an NDA yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's very easy for us to internalize some of the challenges of like applying for a role, getting through interviews, and obviously once you get the role, staying in that role. So it's just to let people know that there's not anything wrong with you per se. A lot of it as well is, systemic. And just to kind of reframe how you look at it. So if you feel that, oh gosh, I have so many inconsistencies in my career, whether it's gaps or job hopping, then just seeing that as actually that's more of you being able to adapt. So working with like a CV coach from, Andrew's company will help you to articulate that inconsistency into how you are able to adapt. Also, a lot of the time under earning when we're taking roles, because sometimes we feel it's a choice between survival or earning more income. Sometimes you're in a role because you're like, oh, I feel safe here. I have my adjustments, but actually I could be earning more. But you're scared that if you were to apply for a manager role or a leadership role, you might not get the same support. So just really understanding that sometimes under earning isn't because you're not capable. It's just that you might be choosing the self-protection. And then I think finally, like being able to translate as well. So where you struggle with the articulation, working with a CV coach, can really give you the support you need to put that on paper. Internally, we know we can do our jobs, and most neurodivergents, we just want to get on with it. It's like, I don't want to talk about how I do the job, just see me doing the job, see my performance. But when you are applying for a job, CV interview, you do have to articulate and having that practice. So just implement all of the skills that Andrew has shared, but also remembering that you have to self-regulate yourself as a neurodivergent. You do have to feel safe. You have to manage, your energy, burn out. So even when you're going through the interview process, looking after yourself, eating well, sleeping well, prepare yourself to go through the process so that you can be successful at the end of it.
Thank you, Esther. And the same question to you, Andrew. If you could give one piece of career advice to a neurodivergent professional today, what would it be?
Yeah, great answer, by the way, Esther. Yeah, I think mine's going to be simple, but it's really effective. And sometimes many people forget this, but ask for help. It doesn't have to be paid help, but ask for help. Look in your network of friends. Are any of them managers? Are any of them involved in recruitment? Ask for help. Get them to read your CV. Get them to tell you what sort of questions are being asked in an interview nowadays. Get them to also help you with your job search. Um, and there's loads of free advice out there. Some of it is overwhelming. I get that. But there is a lot of free advice. If you do find one particular channel, be it YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever, try and stick to one particular channel and one particular person who has the credentials, because there's a lot of advice out there given by people who don't have the experience and don't have the credentials, and they're just in it for the likes and in it for the views and everything else. So make sure if you're going to follow someone or get someone to help you, make sure they have the right experience to give you that help, whether that's over a video or someone that you actually know. So yeah, key thing for me, ask for help, whether that's professional or your friends or your network. Don't ever forget that there's people that will help you.
No, thank you. I would like to say thank you, both of you. And both of you gave a lot of wisdom, gold, like treasure. Like it was really great. I really enjoyed this podcast. Thank you,
Right.
Esther, for the research and to give us the language for what neurodivergent people are really experiencing. And Andrew, your advice really helped translate that into sort of practical steps on how people can act on today. So this has been such a valuable conversation, and I'm really hoping that the listeners get so much out of this because it's been really helpful. So yeah, we had a really good episode. I really enjoyed myself, and I got a lot of help. So whenever I'm ready to, at the moment, I'm going for the entrepreneur world right now. But if I ever decide I want to go back in the job market, I know exactly what to do. So no, thank you both so much for your time.
You're welcome.
And any final words from you before we close?
Just thanks for having me. It's been a great podcast, and I've written down notes as well for my next job search.
And Andrew?
No, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you for the invite, Sarah and Esther. No, it's been been a pleasure, and hope we do something similar again one day. We'll see.
Yeah, we come back on again. Or you can come on Esther's podcast as well. So yeah, you're always welcome. Thank you so much.
I just want to let our audience members know about the 6-week coaching program that I'll be offering for people who are neurodivergent and who want to improve their career prospects in general, or those who want to get into project management. You can also be non-neurodivergent too. I mentioned this earlier in previous episodes, but I want to make the time to offer it up to those looking for help in those areas in their life, as it's a great way to learn new skills to help you advance in your career. I'm also offering my support to people who want to pass the Prince 2 practitioner exam or other project management exams, as I've taken and failed the test a few times, and I would like to help others by showing them how I passed. I also launched my membership, Neuro in Egmar, in which you get supportive community, career and business mentorship, monthly group coaching calls, networking opportunities, mental health well-being days, and unlimited body doubling sessions, and UK and very soon international meetups. I'm also working with the British Dyslexic Association and Lexic, one of the UK's biggest neurodiversity organisations, to ensure our members get free full neurodiversity assessments accredited with an educational psychologist or doctor. So if this sounds like you're interested to learn more, please reach out to me directly to talk more about the membership. Please follow me on all platforms where you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening to Divine Enigma. And if you got to the end, this is a safe place for project managers, professionals, side hustlers, and anybody who's looking to navigate the complexity of being neurodiverse in the workplace and the corporate space. I'll see you next time.